Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're tackling how to make ideas stick.
Oh, yeah.
We all struggle with that, right?
Yeah.
We've got Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath
Okay.
and a bunch of research on memory and decision making.
Sounds good.
Get ready to rethink how you learn and share information.
I'm ready.
Because this one's packed with insights.
It's funny, right? We think just stating facts is enough.
Yeah.
But there's a real art to making an idea memorable.
Totally. The Heath brothers have this great analogy.
Uh-huh.
Memory is like Velcro.
Okay.
The more hooks an idea has, the better it sticks.
I like that.
It made me think about how I can remember every detail of my childhood home.
Right.
But remembering a new credit card number,
Oh, yeah.
it's like trying to herd cats.
Exactly. Your childhood home is overflowing with sensory hooks.
Yeah.
Sights, smells, sounds, experiences.
Uh-huh.
A credit card number. Just a random string of digits.
Right?
So how do we add those hooks to ideas we want to remember?
Yeah, how do we?
Or share? One powerful tool is concreteness.
Concreteness, like being specific and tangible.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that experiment
Okay.
where third graders were divided by eye color
Right.
to teach them about prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Did they talk about that in the book?
They did. The Jane Elliott blue eyes, brown eyes experiment
Yeah.
is a powerful example of how experiencing an idea can make it stick, even a negative one,
Yeah.
for decades.
Wow.
These kids in an all-white town
Right?
didn't truly grasp prejudice until it was made real.
So they had to experience it.
Yeah, blue-eyed kids were given collars,
No.
told they were less intelligent,
Oh,
and their academic performance actually suffered.
really?
Years later, these students remained far less prejudiced than their peers.
That's a bit disturbing.
Yeah,
But it makes you think about how we learn best.
right.
We remember what we experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to remember something new or get someone else to grasp a concept,
Yeah,
find a way to make it an experience.
precisely. And that idea of experience even applies to abstract concepts.
Right.
The book talks about how people struggle to list white things in general,
Really?
but can easily name white things in their fridge.
Interesting.
Our brain needs those concrete anchors.
So adding specific tangible details
Yeah,
can make an abstract idea click.
that's right.
Sort of like creating a shared mental image.
Exactly.
Didn't they have that story about an entrepreneur
Yes.
who used a simple prop to explain his business idea?
Kerry Kaplan was pitching this complex idea
Okay.
for a portable computer,
Uh-huh.
but instead of slides or prototypes,
Right.
he just brought a maroon portfolio.
Portfolio.
Yeah.
What would that even...
It represented the size and shape of the device.
Wait, he got funding by showing them an empty portfolio?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, I think investors would need more than that.
But that simple prop gave them something concrete to focus on.
I guess so.
Instead of getting lost in the technical details, they could visualize it, hold it, and
Yeah.
suddenly they were asking questions.
I-
How much memory? How would it work?
Interesting.
That portfolio turned a presentation into a collaboration.
So it's about giving people a tangible starting point,
Yeah.
even if the idea itself is complex.
Exactly.
What about convincing people an idea is valid?
Okay.
Is that where credibility comes in?
Absolutely. Credibility is crucial.
Uh-huh.
And it can come from different sources.
Like what?
We often think of experts or celebrities,
Right.
but sometimes the most powerful voices are what we call anti-authorities.
Anti-authority.
Everyday people with firsthand experience.
How does that work?
Think about those anti-smoking ads
Okay.
featuring Pam Laffin,
Mm-hmm.
the young mother struggling with emphysema.
I've seen those.
She wasn't a doctor or scientist,
Right.
but her story and those stark images were undeniably credible.
So you're saying she was believable?
Yeah, she wasn't talking about abstract health risks. She was showing the real consequences of smoking.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
So you can be believable even if you're not a big-name expert,
that's right.
as long as you have the experience to back it up.
Exactly.
What about the credibility of the idea itself?
Okay.
How do we
Okay.
make the idea itself convincing?
That's where internal credibility comes in.
Okay.
Think about the vivid details that give urban legends their staying power. Or that study where jurors judged a mother based on whether her son had a Darth Vader toothbrush.
Hold on, a Darth Vader toothbrush.
Uh-huh.
How does that make someone a good or bad parent?
Exactly. It's irrelevant.
So irrelevant.
But those small, vivid details boost credibility because they make the story feel real.
Good.
The study showed that these seemingly meaningless details
Yeah.
actually swayed the jurors' opinions.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's about finding those little details that,
Right.
well, maybe not the core of the argument,
Mm-hmm.
make it feel authentic and relatable.
That's it.
I guess it's like finding the Darth Vader toothbrush for your own ideas.
Exactly.
But isn't that bordering on manipulation?
It's a fine line,
Yeah?
and we have to be careful not to mislead.
Right.
The key is to use truthful, compelling details
Okay.
that genuinely support the core idea.
So how did you do that?
In the book, they talk about the Liz Lerman dance exchange
Okay.
and how they highlighted a 73-year-old dancer
73-year-old dancer.
to prove their commitment to diversity
Nice.
instead of just throwing out statistics.
So it made it more real.
His presence made it undeniable.
That's a much more compelling and human way to get the point across.
Right.
It's not just about numbers, it's about the story behind them.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of numbers, how do statistics fit into all of this?
Statistics can be powerful,
Okay.
but only if they're used effectively.
How so?
We need to make them relatable, bring them down to a human scale.
Give me an example.
Like when the Center for Science and the Public Interest wanted to highlight the fat in movie popcorn.
Okay, yeah.
They didn't just list grams of fat.
Right.
They said one bag was like eating a whole day's worth of unhealthy food.
Oh, wow. That puts it in perspective.
Right.
You instantly understand what that means for you.
Exactly.
So how do we find those relatable comparisons for our own ideas?
Ask yourself, what does this number mean in a way anyone can grasp?
Okay.
Don't just throw out raw data.
Right.
Connect it to something people understand.
Got it.
Now, there's another concept in the book you might find useful.
What's that?
The Sinatra test.
The Sinatra test.
Uh-huh.
I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
Think, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
Hmm.
It's about finding those examples
Okay.
that demonstrate your capability in the most challenging situations.
I see.
The book uses the example of Safe Express,
Okay.
an Indian shipping company, to prove their reliability.
Okay.
They talked about how they handled the release of the Harry Potter book in India on time with no leaks, despite the intense pressure.
So it's not just about saying you're good at something.
Right.
It's about proving it with a real-world example
Exactly.
that showcases your abilities under pressure.
Uh-huh.
Makes sense. But we've talked about making things concrete, credible.
Yeah.
How do we make people actually care about an idea?
Okay.
I mean, we can present the best facts and figures,
Right.
but that doesn't always guarantee action.
That's where we move from logic to emotion.
But emotion.
It's not about manipulating people,
Right.
but about understanding what makes them tick.
Yeah.
What makes them care enough to act.
So how do we do that without resorting to cheap tricks?
One approach is to tap into people's existing emotions and values.
Give me an example.
The book talks about the Truth Anti-Smoking campaign
Oh, yeah.
that targeted teenagers.
Okay.
They didn't lecture.
What'd they do?
They showed piles of body bags outside tobacco companies,
Oh, wow.
highlighting their deception.
That's pretty intense.
It became an act of rebellion not to smoke.
That's really interesting. They completely flipped the script.
Yeah.
Instead of saying smoking is bad for you,
Right.
they made it about standing up against manipulation.
Hmm.
I'd love to know how they came up with that.
It's clever, right?
But isn't appealing to people's existing beliefs,
Okay.
like that anti-smoking campaign did,
Yeah.
a bit risky?
In what way?
What if those beliefs are, not so great?
You raise a good point.
Yeah.
We have to be mindful of the ethics involved, of course.
Right.
But sometimes going beyond self-interest can be more effective.
Mm.
We often assume that's all people care about.
Yeah.
But there are higher needs.
Like what?
Learning, self-actualization, transcendence.
Okay, I'm with you on self-interest, but
Yeah.
transcendence.
Yeah.
Give me an example of how that works in the real world.
Think about Floyd Lee, the retired Army cook,
Okay.
who ran a mess hall in Iraq.
Okay.
He could have just served the standard bland food,
Right.
but he saw his mission as boosting morale. Beautifully presented food decorations, a sense of pride.
Wow.
He tapped into those higher needs,
Uh-huh.
creating an experience that went beyond just filling their stomachs.
Wow, that is powerful.
Yeah,
It's like he understood their need for dignity and belonging
exactly.
in the middle of a war zone.
Mhm.
So how do we identify these higher needs
Uh,
in our own lives and in the people we're trying to reach?
It takes empathy and observation.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what does this person or group truly value?
Hmm.
And remember the study about donations to Save the Children?
Yeah.
People donated more when they read about a specific child named Roya
Right.
even more than when they saw statistics about poverty in Africa.
Wait, I remember reading about that study.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they also find that combining the story with the statistics
Yeah,
actually made people donate less?
that's right.
Really?
It seems like engaging the analytical part of our brain
Okay.
can sometimes dampen our emotional response.
Hmm.
Thinking too hard can actually make us feel less.
Interesting.
So striking that balance between logic and emotion is key.
So how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we appeal to these higher motivations
Okay.
without it feeling like a charity appeal?
Think about the Don't Mess with Texas campaign.
Well,
It wasn't about guilt-tripping litterers.
right.
It was about tapping into Texan pride.
Oh.
They used tough-talking cowboys and that iconic slogan
Yeah.
to make littering feel, well, un-Texan.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It wasn't about what you should do,
Right.
but about who you are.
Exactly.
It made people think, I'm a Texan and Texans don't litter.
That's it.
But it also makes me wonder,
Mm.
if self-interest isn't always the main driver,
Mm-hmm.
how do people actually make decisions?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of how identity shapes our choices.
Okay.
Research suggests we often use what's called an identity model for decision-making.
An identity model.
We ask ourselves, what would someone like me do in this situation? It's less about weighing pros and cons
Okay.
and more about aligning with our perceived identity.
Like those firefighters who got offended when offered a popcorn popper to watch a safety film.
Precisely. They saw themselves as professionals who take safety seriously.
Uh-huh.
So a bribe felt insulting.
Right.
Understanding this identity model can be a game changer when it comes to communication.
How so?
It's about speaking to people's values, their aspirations, their sense of self.
I like that.
But of course, the curse of knowledge often gets in the way.
Their curse of knowledge.
We get so caught up in our own understanding
Right.
that we forget how to make it meaningful for others.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right.
It's like when you're trying to explain something you're passionate about,
Uh-huh.
but the other person just stares blankly at you.
Right. The book gives the example of a group trying to explain the importance of duo piano music.
Duo piano music.
They were so deep in the specifics
Okay.
that they couldn't connect with an audience who had never even heard of it.
Oh, so they were too into it.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid getting stuck in that expert bubble?
By asking ourselves, why?
Why?
Why does this matter? Why should anyone care?
That's a good point.
That duo piano group eventually found their way
Oh.
by connecting their passion to universal emotions and experiences.
So they found common ground.
They found a way to bridge the gap.
So it's not enough to just know your stuff.
Right.
You have to know how to make it relevant to others.
Exactly.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
I have.
Making things concrete credible
Uh-huh.
and tapping into emotions and identity.
Yeah.
But there's one final element from the book
Okay.
that I think is crucial for making ideas stick.
Stories.
Stories, what makes stories so powerful?
Stories are more than just entertainment.
Right.
They're like mental simulations.
Mental simulations.
That help us learn, prepare, and even change our behavior.
Mm.
Think about that Xerox repairman
Okay.
who figured out a tricky error code thanks to a story about a colleague leaving his sweatshirt behind.
All right. The story provided a vivid image and context
Yeah.
that stuck with him even though the technical manual couldn't.
Exactly.
Didn't the book also mention that mentally simulating events,
Yeah.
like through stories,
Uh-huh.
can actually have real-world benefits?
Absolutely. Research has shown that mental simulation can improve problem solving,
Okay.
reduce stress,
Wow.
help us manage emotions,
Really?
and even build physical skills.
So stories are like mental training grounds.
Yeah.
They help us prepare for situations
Right.
without actually having to go through them.
Exactly. And they can be incredibly effective for teaching and motivating. The book gives the example of Professor Bookman,
Right, Kai?
who, instead of lecturing about classroom management,
Right.
shared a captivating story about using peer pressure to deal with the disruptive student.
It's much more engaging than a list of rules.
Right.
It makes you think, okay, that actually makes sense.
Ex-
Right. Stories are powerful tools for showing us what's possible
Yeah.
and making us believe in the possibility of change.
Mhm.
Speaking of change, what about the story of Jared and the Subway diet?
That's a good one.
That was a story that definitely stuck with people.
Yes. His personal journey,
Yeah.
his incredible weight loss by eating Subway sandwiches,
Right.
was far more persuasive than any slogan.
Mm.
It showed people that change was possible,
Right.
and it inspired them to take action.
It makes you think, if you can do it, maybe I can too.
Exactly.
Stories have that incredible power to connect with us on an emotional level
Yeah.
and inspire us to take action.
And that, I believe, is the essence of making ideas stick.
Mm,
It's about creating a spark, an emotional connection that goes beyond just information.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a well-told story can stay with you long after you've heard it.
It really is.
It's not just about entertainment.
Right.
It's about creating that emotional connection
Uh-huh.
that makes an idea truly memorable.
Exactly. And it's not just about those big, life-changing stories like Jared's.
Okay.
Even smaller, relatable stories can have a huge impact.
Like what? Give me an example.
Imagine you're trying to teach NBA rookies about the dangers of AIDS.
Okay.
You could lecture them about statistics and safe sex,
Right.
but what's more likely to stick?
Something that hits closer to home.
Yeah.
Something that makes them think, hey, that could be me.
Right. The NBA did this really smart thing at their rookie orientation.
What'd they do?
After a night of partying,
Uh-huh.
a group of women came in
Okay.
and introduced themselves as HIV positive.
Whoa, that must have been a powerful moment.
It was.
Suddenly, it's not just an abstract risk anymore.
Exactly.
It became real, personal, and unforgettable.
Yeah,
That's the power of a story, to shift perspectives.
it really is.
Okay, so we've talked about how stories can simulate experiences,
Right.
teach lessons,
Uh-huh.
and even change behavior.
Yeah.
But what about inspiring action?
Okay.
What makes a story truly motivating?
One key element is creating a sense of possibility.
Possibility.
We need to show that change is possible,
Right.
that goals can be achieved even in the face of challenges.
So it's not just any story.
Right.
It's about choosing the right kind of story.
Yeah,
One that makes people believe they can do it too.
you got it.
Okay.
And sometimes the most unexpected stories are the most inspiring.
Oh, okay. Give me an example.
Think about the Where's the Beef campaign.
That was a classic.
It was.
But how is that a story?
Well,
It's just a statement about their burgers.
it became a story
Okay.
because it invited the audience to test the claim. It sparked curiosity and encouraged people to experience it for themselves.
So it's like a try before you buy approach.
Exactly.
You're not just telling people.
Right.
You're letting them see for themselves.
And that experience, that direct interaction,
Yeah.
builds belief and fuels action.
So it's about getting people involved.
Yeah. Another great example is the Positive Coaching Alliance.
Okay, what's that?
They wanted to teach youth sports coaches about positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of lecturing,
They had them try it out on the field.
exactly, they had coaches practice giving positive and negative feedback.
Right.
And the coaches realized how much easier it was to criticize than to encourage.
Interesting.
It was a testable credential that changed their approach.
That's so much more effective than just reading it in a manual.
Right.
So we've talked about stories that simulate,
Yeah.
stories that teach,
Mm-hmm.
stories that inspire.
Right.
But what about stories that help us understand ourselves and the world around us?
Okay.
What do those look like?
Those are stories as sense-making tools.
Sense-making tools.
They help us grapple with complex issues,
Okay.
explore different perspectives, and
Mhm.
find meaning in our own experiences.
Okay, I'm following you.
Go-
Give me an example.
Think about the movie Rashomon,
Okay.
where 4 characters recount the same event, a murder, from their own completely different perspective.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It doesn't tell us what really happened,
Right.
but it forces us to confront the subjectivity of truth.
So stories could be like thought experiments.
Exactly.
They challenge our assumptions
Uh-huh.
and make us consider different points of view.
They can illuminate the complexities of human behavior and the power of different narratives.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They remind us that there's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Okay, we've explored a ton of ways stories can make ideas stick.
We have.
But how do we actually use these principles in our own lives?
That's the big question.
Yeah, whether we're teaching leading or just trying to get our point across.
It all starts with understanding our audience.
The audience.
Who are we trying to reach?
Okay,
What do they care about?
right.
What are their values, aspirations, fears?
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to storytelling.
Exactly.
It's about tailoring the message to the audience,
Precisely.
and it's about thinking beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
What are the unexpected connections we can make?
Right.
What are the surprising details that will grab their attention?
It's about finding those Darth Vader toothbrush moments, those
Yeah.
specific relatable details that bring the idea to life.
And we need to make sure it's believable.
Uh-huh.
Can we use those external authorities or relatable anti-authorities?
Right.
Or maybe those internal details and statistics that make the idea click.
Exactly.
And don't forget the Sinatra test.
Oh, yeah.
Find that example that proves your point in the most undeniable way possible.
Right. And finally,
Yeah.
we need to make people care.
make them care.
We need to connect with their emotions, values, and sense of identity.
Make them feel something right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where stories truly shine.
Okay.
They have the power to move us, to inspire us,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately to change us.
So the big takeaway here is to think about your audience,
Yeah.
your core message,
Uh-huh.
and the best way to bridge that gap.
Right.
Use concreteness, credibility, and emotion,
Exactly.
and weave in a powerful story.
It's about finding the right hooks.
The hooks.
The right combination of elements
Yeah.
to make your ideas unforgettable.
Because the best ideas don't just inform, they
Right.
transform. So there you have it. We've explored concreteness and credibility, finding those emotional hooks, and of course the power of stories. You've got some seriously useful tools for making ideas stick.
Yeah, whether you're trying to learn something new, share an idea with others, or even motivate yourself to take action, these principles can make a world of difference.
It's really about connecting with people, isn't it?
It is.
Not just throwing information at them.
Exactly. It's about understanding how our brains work.
Right, and using that knowledge to make our ideas memorable and impactful.
That's the key.
What stuck with you from this deep dive? What will you try differently next time you need an idea to stick? Keep those questions in mind, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.